No one can see if the mice are not
So you're saying to go and sit back on your house?
just these two on
These two right
and
here?
these two on
Okay.
You understand? You tell them that now.
Okay, so just like lean back
Yeah, just when
other people are speaking?
You good. You good.
You gotta be a better cameraman than that.
No, right here. He told he told me he wants to get these shots. Yeah.
Okay,
All right. Well, my only thing is concerned is that two people, this camera can't reach them, see them, unless these people like move back and you follow me?
Okay. Well, I'm imagining that with the cameras in the back can catch him. If he has two cameras in the back.
He's switching. Yes, that would be the one. But he's switching. So he can't switch. But, okay. Do it. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to make it more complicated. You got this one. Right. You got this one right there. Nice to meet you. How you doing?
No, it's great. It's great to have you. Thank you.
My hero.
Appreciate the support. Yes, she's
Apologize for that. So speak as loudly as you can. Sorry. Sorry about that. It won't affect you in any way. Thank you so much. Sorry, I wanted to clarify. I know you were like, what's going on?
Forum will come to order. Welcome to today's forum on the human cost of immigration enforcement and detention, conditions and oversight at Delaney Hall. I want to start by thanking Congresswoman McIver for bringing us here to Newark, New Jersey. We're here to stand united against the Trump administration's out-of-control immigration operation and to expose the dangerous conditions inside Delaney Hall and at detention centers around the country. I also want to thank Mayor Baraka and the staff here at City Hall for hosting us today. Most importantly, thank you to our panel of witnesses for being here. Speaking truth to power requires immense courage. Your presence and your stories matter, and your testimony will help hold accountable an administration that tears families apart and believes that it can violate the law with impunity. Since taking office, the Trump administration has unleashed the most cruel, inhumane, and unlawful immigration policies in modern history. In response, congressional Republicans have chosen one path: silence. Republicans have said nothing when ICE and CBP agents shot and killed U.S. citizens. They have said nothing when DHS deported children battling cancer, or removed mothers, fathers, and grandparents with no criminal records whatsoever. They've remained silent as ICE and CBP terrorize communities with masked agents who detain people solely based on appearance, citizens as well as non-citizens alike. Republicans have refused to conduct even basic oversight of the Department of Homeland Security or acknowledge the mounting abuses. In doing so, they are not bystanders, they are enablers. The only time Republicans raised their voices was to demand billions more for ICE and CBP, all while attempting to eliminate guardrails, accountability, and oversight. And when Democrats asserted that taxpayers' dollars should not fund unchecked abuse, Republicans shut down the government rather than work with Democrats on reform. Republicans have made their priorities clear. They believe ICE and CBP should be terrorizing our communities and tearing families apart. And if a U.S. citizen protests, they can be arrested, labeled a domestic terrorist, or even killed. In the case of Congresswoman McIver, the Trump administration continues to press fabricated charges just because she dared to exercise her legal right to conduct oversight at Delaney Hall. We are all very proud of her for continuing to fight for justice, compassion, and the rule of law. Unfortunately, Republicans in Congress refuse to exercise the checks and balances our constitutional system requires. Just last week, Republicans gave ICE and Border Patrol $70 billion more so they can operate for the next 3 years without any guardrails or reforms. This is on top of the $140 billion Republicans handed ICE and CBP last year to expand Trump's cruel immigration enforcement operation. ICE and CBP now have the largest budgets of any federal law enforcement agency. It's clear that Republicans are more focused on protecting these agencies than the people law enforcement is sworn to protect. That is why we are here today. Oversight is not optional. It's our duty. Even if Republicans have abandoned it, Democrats are here. We have all heard horrific accounts coming out of Delaney Hall, and many of our colleagues here today have witnessed them firsthand. We've seen detainees living in inhumane conditions, mistreatment and abuse by staff, and food contaminated with worms and maggots. These are not isolated incidents. These are symptoms of a system collapsing under secrecy, neglect, profiteering, and disregard for human life. Let me be clear. Every person detained in this country, regardless of immigration status, is entitled to basic human dignity. They are entitled to safe and sanitary shelter, necessary medical care, access to legal counsel, and editable food. These are not luxuries. They are the minimum obligations of a government that detains human beings. Facilities like Delaney Hall are required to meet standards of care. What we have seen and heard makes one thing undeniable. Those standards are being violated. Today's forum is about exposing those violations, demanding accountability, and insisting that the United States government live up to the values it claims it stands for. And to meet those values, as Representative McIver and other members of the New Jersey delegation have called for repeatedly, I too call for the immediate closure of Delaney Hall facility. To our witnesses, thank you again for being here. And to all who fight to ensure our immigration system is rooted in justice, dignity, and humanity, we will not stop. We will not look away, and we will not allow those abuses to continue to go unchallenged. I would like to now to recognize Representative McIver for an opening statement.
Thank you so much to our ranking member Thompson for coming to my district to hold this shadow hearing at this incredibly important moment for New Jersey and this country. It is my pleasure to welcome you and my Democratic colleagues to my hometown of Newark and to New Jersey's 10th Congressional District. Thank you for traveling here to have a conversation that the Trump administration wishes would stay hidden in the shadows. Thank you for knowing it cannot. Over the last year and a half, Trump and his administration have created chaos across the country with their mass deportation campaign, an effort that began right here in Newark. In January of last year, ICE started their terror campaign with a mass armed raid of Ocean Seafood in our Ironbound neighborhood. Shortly thereafter, the administration chose to reopen Delaney Hall, a privately operated ICE detention facility ran by GEO Group. It is New Jersey's largest immigration detention center, and I have seen firsthand the inhumane conditions that detainees face each and every day there. Since Delaney reopened, I have visited the people inside, spoken with families, advocates, and lawyers outside. heard the falsehoods from ICE, and helped secure freedom for a teenager who had been detained. Because of my efforts to ring the alarm about ICE's terror at Delaney, I am facing 17 years in prison on trumped-up charges from this administration. But I have continued exercising my constitutional duties as a member of Congress to conduct oversight of this horrible facility, and have visited it and others like it more than 5 times. And what I've seen and heard has been shocking. Detainees, most of whom do not have any criminal charges or convictions, face unsanitary conditions, inedible and moldy food with live worms in it, barely any access to necessary medical care, and most importantly, the lack of due process. And because of these inhumane conditions, detainees have rightfully spoken out to demand better treatment from ICE and the Department of Homeland Security. 300 of them sent a SOS letter from inside, and they then resorted to a hunger strike and labor strike. Instead of coming clean with the American public about what is happening at Delaney Hall, DHS, which has always had trouble with honesty under Trump, is ignoring these allegations, even denying that a hunger strike is happening. This is all the more concerning given the record number of detainee deaths in ICE custody over the past year. Just last year, ICE was at its deadliest on record for people in its detention. This year is on track to be even deadlier, another sad legacy of Trump's America. And it's no surprise that conditions continue to worsen at Delaney Hall and at detention centers across the country. Just last week, my Republican colleagues voted to give ICE and Border Patrol $70 billion to continue operating without oversight and without consequences. That's on top of the $140 billion Republicans just gave ICE and CBP last year. ICE and CBP now have more funding than most countries. And for the operation of Delaney Hall in particular, we're shelling out an estimated $1 billion in taxpayer dollars to the GEO Group. So what have ICE and CBP done with all of this funding? They've not invested in safe detention facilities for sure. They're not upholding American values. Instead, they're maximizing use of force, escalating tensions by using pepper spray, armored vehicles, beating people and beating protesters at Delaney Hall specifically, and reportedly doing similar damage to people inside. This is all a part of this administration's larger plan to erase the rights of people in this country, and to shut up the people who's tried to stop that abuse. Unlike my Republican colleagues, I refuse to let them succeed. It is difficult, costly, and an uncertain fight, but it is one worth fighting. I am glad that our Democratic colleagues have come here today to stand shoulder to shoulder with our community and communities across this country in this work. We will keep standing up for detainees and the peaceful protesters at Delaney Hall. We will keep standing up to ICE's violence. We will demand accountability from this administration, and we will shut down Delaney Hall. We will keep showing up unannounced to do the jobs we have been elected to do, to conduct thorough oversight of ICE and DHS, to ensure that their abuses can't continue to operate in the dark, and to stop the cruelty for the sake of all of our districts, towns, and neighborhoods across this country. Trump and his administration want us scared and silent. They want to whitewash our streets. They want to step on the vulnerable. They want to criminalize oversight and lock me up. Whatever they try, we're not backing down. Again, thank you to Ranking Member Thompson and to my colleagues for joining us here and for your solidarity. I look forward to this discussion.
Thank you very much. Let me introduce my other colleagues who are here. We have a small table. After we go through questions, we'll kind of change, but to my right is Congresswoman Bunny Watson-Cole. Ms. Poe, and Mr. Al Green. And I reference Mr. Green because he handles his business. All right. So look, we're here to hear testimony, and since we're in Ms. McIver's district, I'm going to defer back to Ms. McIver to introduce our witnesses for the panel.
Thank you, Ranking Member. Our first witness is my mayor, the Honorable Ras Baraka. He is currently the mayor of Newark, New Jersey. He has been directly on the front lines of the fight against the inhumane treatment of detainees at Delaney Hall. Before being elected in 2014 as the 40th mayor of Newark, he served as a public school teacher, one of mine, 5th grade, and in high school principal. Welcome, Mayor Ras Baraka, and thank you for We also have Mr. Amal Sinha. He is the executive director of the American Civil Liberties Union of New Jersey, where he guides a team of professionals and advocates towards advancing racial justice, holding institutions accountable, and promoting American civil rights and liberties. Under his leadership, ACLU New Jersey secured numerous civil rights victories for New Jerseyans, including securing driver's license for all residents regardless of immigration status and blocking hundreds of the deportations. Thank you for being here. Great. I see we have Barry Martinez on my paper. Oh, yes, we do. Okay, Barry Martinez. We have Ms. Barry Martinez is the Deputy Director of Strategy at the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. NJAIJ is New Jersey's largest immigration coalition fighting for policies that protect and empower immigrants. Under her leadership, NJAIJ has served as a major training site for immigration organizers and advocates across the state, providing the expertise and skill sets needed to implement change. Thank you for being here. We also have Mr. Adam Marshall. He is a U.S. citizen and Army veteran who was arrested and detained by ICE outside of Delaney Hall. A trained medic, he was arrested by ICE while providing medical care to protesters who were pepper sprayed and injured. We look forward to hearing from you all in your testimonies. Thank you so much once again for being here. And I just want to thank the mayor, Mayor Baraka, and his staff for hosting us today in City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the hard part, I have to keep my witnesses' testimony to 5 minutes. So I now ask Mayor Baraka for an opening statement.
Thank you. Just want to first thank you, Congressman, for still on. Thank you. Just want to thank you for convening us, and my Congresswoman McIver for organizing this here in the city of Newark, all the congressional representation that's here today. We thank you for the work that you're doing and being here in the city of Newark. Obviously, we know Delaney Hall is a privately operated facility. It is not a federal facility. They have a federal long-term contract. If you go to the building, it says private property on the fence, even though they arrested me for federal trespassing. Since 2025, it has become a flashpoint around the country because of what we saw on TV, on social media happening in front of Delaney Hall. But it needs to be pointed out that for over a year, even before the building had opened, there were long and consistent protests that have been going on and are still going on outside of Delaney Hall. We know that there have been reports of the conditions inside the facility, reports of that describe unsanitary and unsafe living conditions, including concerns about hygiene, food safety, the spread of diseases, including inadequate and denial of medical care, including for serious health conditions and pregnancy, delayed or insufficient access to medication, overcrowding, and detainees forced to sleep on floors. There were multiple accounts of claims from detainees are served spoiled and contaminated food, including reports of worms, irregular or insufficient meals, limited access to hygiene items like toilet paper and toiletries, unsanitary bathrooms, and poor facility maintenance. We know that officials from Newark and from the state have been denied entry. Our health department has recently been denied entry. The state's health department has been denied entry. We have ongoing litigation with GEO Group because we've been denied entry from the very beginning. The GEO Group had a contract with the federal government. Because they had this contract, which was not signed and ready yet, they began to acquire the property known as Delaney Hall, which was a halfway house prior to that. They purchased it and they changed the use of it without going through the proper channels of getting a variance through the zoning board, which would require public meetings. At that point, we began to challenge them about changing the use of this property. They denied us entry over and over again. We went down there at least 6 times early in the morning at 7 a.m. to get entry. They denied us every time. We went to court, and while we were in court, they began to put detainees in the property while we were in court in dispute that the building should actually be open to prevent us from closing it down physically. In that process, which is known nationally, I was arrested in that process, and my congresswoman charged, with doing her job, because she was doing her job, charged in my mind, illegally, and facing a serious amount of time. So we have a public kind of litigation with GEO Group right now. Our litigation is with GEO Group, and we want to keep the attention on that and not on other kind of things that have been going on. We want to focus on the conditions that are happening inside the property. We also want to focus on GEO Group's inability or unwillingness to follow state and local guidelines and policies and laws without getting proper permits, which means the facility has not been properly permitted, or folks have not gone in there to investigate it the way it probably that should, which is why walls have been falling down and other kind of physical issues have been taking place in the building. Now, coupled with that, there are inhumane practices happening to the actual detainees in the building. So we are trying to and will expand our lawsuit with the help of the state and some of our partners to expand our lawsuit to include not just code enforcement issues, not just UCC violations, but the violations of human rights and the violation of human welfare. And the reality is, if this was a nursing home in the state of New Jersey, and we've had our problems with nursing homes in the state of New Jersey, this was a nursing home that did not follow the rules of the local government or the state government, that had claims of inhumane treatment, poor and bad food, people passing away, women who have had miscarriages in the place, we would have already moved to shut it down, period. The fact that this is not being shut down speaks volumes to GEO's group ability to disregard law and order in this state and in this city. They're using the federal contract that they have to shield themselves, in my mind, illegally from what any other private facility would have to undergo in the city of Newark. They are not government. This is not a government organization. This is not owned and run by the United States government. This is not a headquarters for ICE or a headquarters for Homeland Security. It is the GEO Group, and they could take detainees or prisoners from anywhere. They have a contract to use some of their beds to take detainees from ICE. That is the contract that they have, and they rushed it so they can make $1 billion without answering to any of us here in the city of Newark. So this is where we are now. We have a present lawsuit. The judge, Judge Simper, has forced us into mediation. We haven't gone yet, but this is more than just mediation. Okay? We need a judge to actually rule on this, to say that this place is unsanitary, unfit, to say they have not followed the city and local laws, that it should be closed down immediately. And we're looking for a judge to do that before, the protesters demand that happen. So I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In Washington, the leader in charge has what they call a magic minute. You had magic 5 minutes, so I'm going to hold everybody else to the real 5 minutes. Magic minute, right. Again, thank you for your testimony. I now recognize Mr. Shinhop to summarize his statement in 5 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ranking Member Thompson and Representative McIver and committee members for convening this hearing. My name is Amol Sinha. I'm the Executive Director at the ACLU of New Jersey. And as you all might know, the ACLU has fought relentlessly against the Trump administration's abuses of power and attack on our rights. From the moment that this administration announced its intention to expand its detention system, we've been fighting to make sure it doesn't happen. And that includes about 250 legal actions against the administration on things such as conditions of immigration detention, mandatory detention, due process issues, and freeing immigrants who were detained unjustly, including for protected speech. We're also proud to stand with Congresswoman McIver as we filed a brief defending her against the unjust prosecution against her. Look, I want to name that the most important voices that should be at this hearing are not here. Those voices belong to the people still inside Delaney Hall. And I want to read a line from one of the letters that was referenced from inside Delaney Hall. And I quote, "They constantly threaten to deport us, transfer us to punishment units, and move us from one detention center to another. They take photos of us in dormitories without our consent and tell us that we have no rights here. They tell us we have no rights here." Those are the words of detained people inside Delaney Hall, scribbled on handwritten letters by people who refuse to be silenced. Contrary to what DHS Secretary Mullen would have you believe, these are not pre-drafted statements from formal press releases or part of some orchestrated campaign. These individuals put pen to paper under fear of punishment and retaliation, and many are continuing to starve themselves to have the government recognize their humanity. They feel like they have no other option. And the conditions that they're describing are those that others have mentioned as well. Some of you here today have observed them firsthand, and they include things like inedible food, systematic and egregious medical neglect, coercion, including pressuring individuals to sign voluntary departure orders without them realizing what it is that they're signing. And outside the facility, the picture is also disturbing, as ICE agents responded to largely peaceful demonstrations by hitting protesters and shoving them into oncoming traffic and assaulting journalists. The lawlessness and the cruelty is the point. Now, New Jersey has made its opposition to Delaney Hall clear from the start. We have the mayor who filed suit against the GEO Group in 2025. Governor Sherrill has called for its closure. The Attorney General recently had to sue to force health inspectors inside the facilities. Our communities have shown up and organized and said loudly, no, that we will not allow this facility here. And just yesterday, it was reported that the family of Geraldine Delaney, for whom the facility is named, also wants to see it closed. Her niece, Marianne Delaney, said, and I quote, "It was intended to be a 250-bed facility to do good, to save people's lives, not to be a warehouse for human despair." Not to be a warehouse for human despair. She described it as the antithesis of everything that her aunt stood for. And people are dying in these facilities. At least 50 people have died in ICE custody since the beginning of the administration, the highest toll on record. And among them was Jean Wilson Brutus, a 41-year-old Haitian man who died in December of 2025 after just one day of being at Delaney Hall. Like Jean, each of the 50 people that have died in ICE custody had a name. They had a family. They died under the custody of the United States government in conditions funded by our tax dollars. And recently, the administration moved to ensure that we hear less about these deaths. ICE eliminated its requirement to require notification of the reporting of a death that occurred within 30 days of a person's release from custody. And that rule existed for one reason: to prevent ICE from releasing dying people at the last possible moment to avoid accountability. And now it's gone. And it's yet another deliberate policy to conceal the actions of a dangerous agency at the deadliest moment in immigration detention in decades. Let me just say this, and I'll close by saying this. Every time a member of Congress has gone to visit Delaney Hall, we have learned something that the administration didn't want us to know. We need members of Congress to keep showing up repeatedly. We need every member of Congress to act with the courage of the New Jersey delegation. And I want to especially shout out Congresswoman McIver, who is going back repeatedly, even though she is doing so at great personal risk. So we urge this body to advance a number of things. First, we need to claw back as much of the funding as possible. We need to make sure that we're not giving ICE a blank check to impose human rights violations on our communities. We urge this body to also advance Representative Jay Paul and Senator Booker's Dignity for Detained Immigrants Act, which would establish some standards for conditions, strengthen independent oversight, and phase out private detention and protect detained people from the abuses that we're documenting in real time. We also need to transform our immigration system and reimagine it from the ground up. This is not just an immigrants' rights issue, it's a racial justice issue, it's a human rights issue, and we need to end the mass incarceration of immigrants once and for all. The people of Delaney Hall have done something extraordinary. They've put their bodies on the line. Now it's our turn to act. And we urge you to demand transparency, conduct your repeated oversight visits as you've been doing, and advance the Dignity for Detained Immigrants Act, and use every tool at your disposal to heed the demands of the people that are detained. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We now recognize Ms. Martinez to summarize her statement in 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today. My name is Delaney Martinez, and I serve as the Deputy Director of Strategy with the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice, also known as NJIJ. NJIJ is the state's largest immigration coalition that fights for policies that protect and empower immigrants. And our coalition has been raising the alarm about Delaney Hall well before it even opened. New Jersey has been a national leader in the fight against immigrant detention. In 2021, New Jersey passed AB 5207 into law, imposing a statewide ban on public and privately owned ICE contracts. But in 2023, our statewide ban was challenged, and GEO Group, a global, multi-billion-dollar private prison corporation, would later join that legal suit. We at NJAIJ have not taken our eyes off of GEO Group since. The private provisions of the statewide detention ban, which immigrant communities fought for, would later be partially struck down by the courts, allowing GEO Group to open Delaney Hall under a 15-year contract valued at $1 billion. And I want to make one thing clear, that GEO Group will profit $1 billion from family separation and immigrant misery in the Garden State. Since it opened, Delaney Hall has been a dangerous facility. People detained inside have been subject to medical neglect, psychological torture, poor living conditions, and even death. People like Emmanuel, who spent 130 days in what GEO Group labeled medical isolation, but what you and I and the public knows to be solitary confinement. GEO Group stripped him of his crutches, the very same crutches he needed in order to walk, because they labeled them as weapons. So for 130 days, Emmanuel sat in solitary confinement. People like Jean Wilson Brutus, a healthy 41-year-old asylum seeker who was taken into Delaney Hall, and less than 24 hours in ICE custody, was rushed out in an ambulance and pronounced dead at the hospital. And to this day, his family has not been granted an independent autopsy. People like the hunger strikers, who were physically beaten, tear gassed, and denied access to their attorneys and their families as retaliation for speaking out against the conditions inside Delaney Hall. And all the while, GEO Group pocketed its $164 per bed per day. Following the reopening of the facility, New Jersey's capacity for immigrant detention has more than quadrupled. Delaney Hall has been at the center of immense controversy. In the facility's first week of operation, I led the daily vigils outside of the facility, calling for GEO Group to allow the city of Newark to do its legal inspection of the facility. And I witnessed, and the world witnessed, and I repeat, the world witnessed, when dozens of mass ICE agents swarmed Representative McIver, Representative Watson-Coleman, Representative Menendez, and arrested Mayor Baraka last year. Organizers were shot at with pepper pellets. And all we had was posters and bullhorns and hands. We asked ourselves then, if GEO Group and ICE have nothing to hide, why have we witnessed such aggressive acts against our community and our public officials? And we are here again 1 year later, and we are still asking ourselves that very same question, because nothing, and I mean nothing, has changed. Because I have witnessed Representative McIver be politically persecuted for doing her job. I witnessed Representative Menendez attempt to visit Delaney Hall and be denied access for over 15 hours, forcing him to stay up all night until he was let in. And I witnessed when Senator Kim was pepper sprayed by ICE agents when attempting to de-escalate those same agents from attacking the crowd. We have all witnessed this. Governor Cheryl was also denied access, and when finally allowed inside, she wasn't allowed to speak to a single soul. The New Jersey Department of Health was prohibited from accessing the medical unit, the sleeping quarters, and the bathrooms, which are the most important areas that needed oversight. And so, I want to ask, I've been asking myself a different question, and I'm asking other folks that ask themselves that very same question, is how many more times do we have to talk about Delaney Hall until it's permanently shut down? Because the people inside that ICE jail are using every creative avenue to fight for their freedom. So we must do everything in our power to free them and end immigrant detention in the Garden State. Because New Jerseyans will continue to stand with the families and continue to hold a multi-billion-dollar private prison operator accountable, so that one day Delaney Hall is permanently shut down. Thank you to the committee for this opportunity to testify. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I now recognize Mr. Marshall to summarize his statement for 5 minutes.
Honorable congresspersons, brothers and sisters from New Jersey and New York, friends around the world, my name is Adam Marshall. I'm a veteran, a pacifist, and a member of the citizens movement known as Eyes on Ice. From the period of March 25, 2025 to the date of my wrongful arrest and kidnapping by ICE, I have come to Delaney Hall 3 to 4 times per week to provide mutual aid to families, cite safety and de-escalation to our volunteers, and to pray alongside brothers and sisters from every faith, and to bear witness to the crimes that occur at Delaney Hall concentration, such as New Jersey Criminal Code 2C 13-8 and the breach of the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments of the Constitution. The events that led to my kidnapping began with the detainee-led hunger strike and labor strike on the 21st of May. At present, these are the demands of the Women's Union. 1. Release all the women, priority given to those under 21, the sick, and the mothers. 2. Independently investigate the officer who has been sexually abusing the women. 3. Restore full visitation privileges. 4. Provide meaningful legal support. 5. Contract cleaning services and stop forcing the labor of the detained. 6. Provide qualified nurses and doctors. Stop giving incorrect medicines and denying access to care. 7. Replace the current food supplier to meet basic nutritional needs and accommodate both religious and medical diets. 8. Repair the plumbing and HVAC in the second bathroom in the women's unit and all of the bathrooms. 9. Provide safe drinking water. 10. Retrain GEO Group staff to ensure dignified, lawful treatment of detained people. Outside the facility, the first 4 days of the strike were peaceful and without incident. At approximately 1 a.m. on the 25th of May, that changed when a convoy of 10 to 15 ICE vehicles arrived at the West Gate to abscond the detainee who had led the strike. Officers immediately applied force against protesters with batons and clouds of pepper spray. They shoved a woman in her 50s to the ground. The officers returned in daylight and repeated these tactics, pepper spraying Senator Andy Kim in the process. By this time, ICE had injured so many people that we had set up an aid station to care for those who were being bruised, cut, crushed, tackled, and maced. Minor correction to the record, in the Army I underwent combat lifesaver training, not medic training, but it's just a layer. So I played a role in evacuating casualties, ferrying supplies, and doing whatever I could to preserve life and limb. This was the full extent of my actions during the protest after ICE arrived. I did not carry protest signs, I did not antagonize ICE agents, and I wore red crosses on the front and rear of my jacket. And I washed eyes, irrigated wounds, and led the injured to safe areas. On the 26th of May, I resumed this work. At about 4 p.m., several people on the protest line reminded me that ICE agents were referring to me as the target. They were alleging that I was carrying knives and bear meats, none of which was true. I rendered aid to approximately a dozen people throughout the afternoon, and before my kidnapping, a quadcopter drone flew above energy transfer facilities south of Delaney Avenue, and about 4 to 5 ICE agents wearing gas masks emerged from the west gate. I was standing on the south side of Delaney Avenue behind Marmot. About 6 ICE agents rushed towards my location, tackled me to the ground, and dragged me into the main courtyard with my arms behind my back. They were yelling, "Where is the bear mace? Who did you give the bear mace to?" I had never owned or used bear mace. I told them I was a veteran and I asserted my Amendment rights. I was pushed onto the roof of the blue SUV to be searched, and my shoes and socks were removed. None of the other arrested individuals were barefoot, so I presume this was a humiliation tactic. My face was scanned into what I presume was the mobile fortified file. When searching my belongings and finding my passport and UK citizenship documents, they told me I should run off to England because I won't get arrested there. Several ICE agents were also veterans approached me. The first was a shirtless white male, 20 to 30 years old, with wavy, dirty blonde hair, who threatened violence against me but was discouraged by his peers. A former Marine with a large salt and pepper beard explained that he was the one truly supporting the defending the Constitution. An Air Force Master Sergeant showed me a phone picture of himself in uniform, and below it, I bet he thought ICE couldn't arrest American citizens. Another veteran with reddish blonde hair eating a wheat snack bread from an MRE told me, "Exet is going to love you. You are closed." I thanked all these gentlemen for their service. 2 HSI personnel came forward to conduct an interrogation, which I refused on the grounds of my Amendment rights. Other officers removed the handcuffs from behind my back, tied a chain around my waist, and attached the handcuffs to the front of the chain, claiming this was, quote, more comfortable. This setup resembled the shackles I have seen the Delaney Hall detainees wear when they are transported. I was moved to a vehicle with another arrested gentleman going by the name of Johnny, and we were driven out of the facility to a deserted portion of industrial Newark, beneath an underpass New Jersey Turnpike. Our cuffs were removed, and we were ordered to line up facing a metal wall with our hands above our heads. To me, this resembled an execution. After about 2 minutes, our seized belongings were thrown at our feet in evidence bags, and the agents claimed they were letting us off with a warning and to never return. Based on all that I have witnessed, I wish to raise the highest level of alarm. New Jersey's human trafficking laws have been flouted by DHS agents. The constitutional protections against illegal search and seizure, the right to due process, and the right to a speedy trial simply do not apply at 451 Delaney Avenue. War-hardened veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan are being employed by an agency that wants to expel our neighbors and intimidate those who speak out against them. I demand that members of this panel do all they can to fulfill the demands of the strikers and to dismantle ICE and DHS. I also ask for an independent investigation into the death of John Wilson Davis. I thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I welcome your questions.
The witnesses for their testimony. And I remind each member that he will have 5 minutes to question the panel. I'll now recognize myself for questioning. Mr. Marshall, first of all, thank you for your service. We're a better country than that. What you received is abhorrent, and I promise you part of the oversight mission that this committee will look at is each and every instance that American citizens have been denied their constitutional rights, and however long it takes. And so part of the oversight that we're doing now is making the record so that we can look into all of this. So your testimony is absolutely point on. Mr. Mayor, one of the most difficult jobs in America being mayor of the city. And I can only imagine when you're trying to do your job and prevent it by both federal government and private entity. Can you say to us how you would like the Delaney Hall situation handled as mayor of Newark?
Well, I think the same thing I told the deputy director of Homeland Security, that the best way to solve this problem is to close Delaney Hall. And that is the only answer that is, palatable to me. Like, I think that's the way it needs to happen. The conditions are horrible. ICE agents have come and, as you say, beat and violated people's constitutional rights. They put the law enforcement in our city and our state in precarious situation. They have been calling 911 after we have decided that we should not be down there. They've called 911 and had police respond to 911. They've even called 911 saying that there were people being assaulted, and the police came down there and found no one being assaulted. And so they're wasting our resources, our time, our energy to try to force us to protect an inhumane facility. And now legally trying to take us to court because we refuse to respond the way they want us to respond, that we have a right locally to make decisions about the priority of the operations of our police in and around our city.
So you said they want to take you to court?
They had filed a suit against us because the police are now saying, obviously, because when there's a 911 call, that we need to prioritize that. And we need to prioritize that based on other calls that we get in the city. And we need to prioritize that based on the history of the fact that they've been calling police saying things that happening that have not in fact happened.
Well, the odd part to me is that they are now suing you, saying you're not doing their job.
Right.
And you already have them in court,
Right.
saying the exact same thing. Ms. Martinez, part of any advocacy group is to be the voice of that entity. What has been your experience with Delaney Hall and people there with respect to complaints that you hear?
I can answer. Thank you for that question. What we're hearing from advocates that are on the ground every single day, and the families that come out of Delaney Hall after visitation, when visitation is even allowed, because they've continuously shut down visitation GEO Group, are horrendous stories that come out. Even attorneys have been turned away from visiting their own clients. And the stories that we hear are of medical neglect, psychological torture. One story that I have is that there's a woman inside the detention center with multiple medical conditions. She has glaucoma, she has anemia, she has high blood pressure, and she has blood circulation issues. And her attorney and her family have continuously urged GEO Group to allow for her to have her medication and to no longer delay that medication. But GEO Group considers the medication and the treatment as cosmetic, and so they say I don't care. I really want to shout out the folks that have been at the tent receiving families every single day. And that is the Eyes on ICE Coalition. There was a community member that was just recently released from detention. And I was in the tent and I was providing interpretation. And I asked her what was her time like in Delaney Hall, and she just shook her head. And she told me that one day she woke up and she could not feel her arm. She suffers from anxiety and high blood pressure, and so she ran to the medical unit. And they took her blood pressure and told her everything's fine. But the whole day, for 24 hours, she was showing me the pinches that she had on her arm, trying to pinch herself to feel if she's actually like feeling anything on her arm. And she didn't. And she still had the scars. She was showing me the scars from her pinching herself to see if she had any feeling in her arm. She went back to the medical unit, and GEO Group employees realized that there was no batteries in the blood pressure machine that they were measuring her with. And they said, oh, your blood pressure is really high. Here's a Tylenol pill. And that's all they gave her. And so these are the stories. These are not just, 1, 2 stories that happen in Delaney Hall. This happens so much that it is a pattern. GEO Group is continuously at fault for medical neglect, and that's why Delaney Hall must be shut down.
Thank you so much. I now recognize the young lady from New Jersey, Ms. McIver, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Ranking Member, and thank you, Senator Rodriguez, for your testimony, and thank you, Mr. Martin, for your service. I want to ask, I'm so thankful for you describing in quite detail the whole account where detained by ICE. Thank you for that. I want to ask, did they read your right to explain why you were being detained?
Yes, they did read Miranda rights upon initial detention. That was in the courtyard, but they did not explain the charges. But they did not explain any charges against me. And so at this moment, I do not get that insurance.
And they did mention that they were approaching you because they thought you had knives and
Embarrassed. I've never carried weapons my entire 15 months plus at Driggs Avenue. One thing that I want to reiterate about Eyes on ICE is that we are a purely peaceful movement. It is really one of the tenets, one of the 11 tenets of our organization.
Mayor Baraka, has the federal government provided any explanation for why you were arrested outside of Delaney Hall on federal trespassing charges, despite going there to conduct oversight in the city in which you are the mayor of?
No, they've never provided any explanation of why that happened. They refused to issue an apology. They just magically walked away from the charges.
Thank you for that. Mr. Sinha, and you talked about this during your testimony, but would love for you to spend some time to elaborate, because this is really important to us as we, move forward and really start to take some real action. And we are back in control in January of this Congress. What policy changes and recommendations do you and New Jersey ACLU urge Democrats in Congress to push forward?
Thank you for the question, Representative McIver. Look, first of all, I think the main thing that we need to focus on is limiting the funding that has been going to ICE and clawing back the funding. We've seen essentially a blank check given to this administration and to this agency for its lawlessness. And they, as you all mentioned, have more money than many other countries. They are the best funded law enforcement agency in the world, and it is something that we need to ensure that we are holding accountable as much as we can. Secondly, as I mentioned, I think the Dignity for Detained Immigrants Act is an important bill to pursue. Now, it's a hard bill to talk about because there is no dignity for detained immigrants in the United States, but it is something that I think will provide measures of accountability for the lawlessness and for the human rights violations that we're seeing. And lastly, I would say not only do we need to shut down Delaney Hall and make sure that the most egregious conditions are addressed, we need to end immigration detention once and for all. There is no reason why people who are not a threat to the public, and you've heard the stories, 85% or more have not been charged with a crime across the United States. There's no reason why people who are not a threat to the public should be detained in prisons across this country. And so my hope is that someday we will be able to see the light and stop using immigration detention as a way to further mass incarceration in this country.
Thank you for having that.
Thank you very much, Chair. Recognize another young lady from New Jersey, Ms. Pope, 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ranking Member Thompson, for coming to New Jersey and leading this very, very critical and very important oversight forum. I want to thank my colleague, Representative MacGyver, for focusing our attention right here in her district. This administration has unleashed unprecedented attack to block Congress' constitutional authority to conduct oversight here. But we will not be intimidated, and you've heard that already said by many of our members. Let me be clear. Delaney Hall needs to be closed. Our state and our city do not want Delaney Hall. No one wants their tax dollars floating into the GEO Group. The GEO Group, a private for-profit company, is making millions on the misery and suffering of our neighbors. It has no interest in treating our neighbors with dignity. Its interest lies in filling as many beds as possible to increase their shareholders' value. This is the same company that has been subject to countless lawsuits for mistreating detainees and violating their rights. It's also the same company that has donated millions of dollars to Donald Trump and the congressional Republicans. In return, GEO has been rewarded with a 15-year, $1 billion contract to run Delaney Hall. Now, but that's not all. The new acting director of ICE was a former GEO Group executive. What a coincidence when you think about it. I don't know, but that seems like corruption, plain and simple. As a member of the Homeland Security Committee, I have tried different ways to stop ICE abuses. In the recent reconciliation package, I offer several separate amendments to ensure greater transparency at detention facilities, protect detainees' rights, preserve independent inspections, and hold ICE accountable. While all were absolutely blocked, and I know we must do more. I know that we have to do more. The conditions at Delaney are disturbing. You've heard it be said. Let me repeat it. Moldy food, dirty water, no access or very limited access to medical care. During my own visit, I saw these conditions for myself. Detainees are waiting weeks, months, and even years to see a judge. And why do I say that? I've spoken personally to some of those very same detainees who are still waiting after 10 and 11 months just to get their day in court, just to be heard. When they finally get their day in court, many will have their cases denied without any real consideration. I want to commend the courage, the bravery, and the resilience of these detainees collectively raising their voices. It's not easy when they know what's happening to them and what may very well be at risk. They are simply demanding human conditions and the respect and respect for their rights. Secretary Mullen has frequently conflated Delaney Hall to prisons, including during an exchange with me at a hearing. But the evidence is clear. The vast majority of the detainees have absolutely no criminal record. In fact, it's definitely a point. In fact, most have the low security classification level, meaning that they pose no threat to the public. We must push against this false narrative that seeks to demonize our immigrant community. Mr. Sinha and Ms. Martinez, this administration has indeed stripped away legal status from millions, making thousands of our neighbors in the tri-state area subject to deportation and detention in places like Delaney. Meanwhile, the administration has made it absolutely difficult and harder for detainees to access counsel and the courts. We've said that already. It has used cruel tactics to deny bail for those who would be eligible for release. What barriers to due process exist at Delaney Hall, and how do you think we should be addressing them at the federal level? What would be your recommendation?
So thank you for the question, Congresswoman. There are so many instances of violations of due process, and in fact, the Trump administration and the U.S. Attorney's Office have been in court admitting to these violations in repeated moments. And courts in New Jersey, I have to shout out the District of New Jersey, they have admonished the Trump administration for violating court orders dozens of times, if not hundreds of times, over the past year. And so what we need to do is make sure that we are continuing to hold them accountable in court. Make sure that we are pushing as much as we can, and that there are actual consequences for violating court orders. Now, we're not talking about ministerial things that they're doing. We're not talking about meaningless slip-ups, and we're not talking about one slip-up. We're talking about hundreds of them. And in some instances where people have been deported to countries that they have no relationship with, and only to then say, "Oops, we made a mistake. That shouldn't have happened." And unfortunately, the harm that they are inflicting is irreparable. It's separating families. It's in many instances causing actual injury, in addition to emotional injury, and folks are being left in a lurch without having any recourse. So one of the things that we need to make sure we're doing is that we're looking at options to hold accountable U.S. attorneys' offices and ICE agency and the ICE agency in moments where they are violating court orders openly. There have been instances here in New Jersey where people have had successful habeas petitions, and those habeas petitions say that those folks should not be transferred from Delaney Hall or Elizabeth to outside of the state, yet folks are continuing to be transferred. They are retaliating against people for exercising their constitutional rights, including people who were engaged in the hunger protest, in the hunger strike at Delaney Hall. And these are the sorts of things that we need to address and make sure that we're adhering to principles of due process and other principles of the Constitution. I think there is a pathway for legislation, either through the Dignity for Detained Immigrants Act or other pieces of legislation, to make sure that that due process is upheld. It's unfortunate that we have to think about legislation when the Constitution is right there, but we must, and every branch of government is responsible for doing whatever it can. So I appreciate your work.
New Jersey has been a national leader in protecting immigrant communities and really defending due process. At the state level, there is a commitment from the governor to allocate $20 million commitment for $20 million to invest in legal services. And we know when there is legal representation, that protects due process. And that is not enough, right? Families are visiting their loved ones and not having access to visitation. Families are hearing from their loved ones what's happening inside continuously. And it's urgent that there continue to be independent oversight at Delaney Hall. Because what's happening at Delaney Hall, again, is happening not just at Delaney Hall, it's part of the immigrant detention system as it is. And so it's important to, one, have legal representation for our communities and continue that. But it's also really important to continue holding GEO Group accountable and making sure that there is transparency for what's happening in that facility. Because what's happening is that GEO Group and DHS and the Trump administration have one story, and the people detained inside and the families and the attorneys and advocates have another story. So, and it's not an issue of who is right, it's an issue of transparency. And there's so much evidence already that exists, but it's the access that's the issue.
Thank you so very much.
Generated changes expired. I now recognize.
You have another New Jersey.
Yes, absolutely. It's me out for 5 minutes.
So, good afternoon, Ranking Member Thompson and my colleague, Congresswoman McIver. I want to first thank you for hosting this hearing. To my colleagues, I know, I don't think it works. I'm just going to say that quiet part out loud. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to sit here and speak to today's witnesses. You know, I have the unusual, I guess, experience of having been an advocate who was also present when Mayor Baraka was illegally arrested, and also to bear witness to the assault, the very clear assault against my now colleagues, Congresswoman Bonnie Watson-Coleman and Congresswoman McIver. In fact, I still have the video of the assault and the moment in which that ICE agent put his hands on Congresswoman McIver. She wasn't even looking when contact was initially made. And so I know that what ICE and Customs and Border Protection and staff for GEO Group, what they say doesn't always match up reality. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've also had the opportunity as a now member of Congress to go into Delaney Hall. And again, as an advocate, I understood that the folks with the most oversight power are in fact members of Congress who have the ability to demand entry and to ask tough questions and relay back out. And I could share that my experience in going into both Delaney Hall and the Elizabeth Detention Center is our worst fears were confirmed. I met plenty of individuals who shared that the lack of sanitation, the lack of air circulation, the lack of even space, the fact that meals have to begin at 4 in the morning because that facility is so stretched to accommodate the individuals within. So many of the things are concerning, but the one that concerns me the most, what I believe amounts to medical abuse, is the lack of medical care and the way in which medications are given to detainees. I will summarize because I'm going to respect this 5 minutes, although I love magic minutes. But I would say that I met an individual whose teeth were destroyed at one point or another during detention and is forced to live off of meal replacement shakes because no one either at GEO Group or ICE or DHS will get him dental care. I met another individual who slipped and fell and was complaining of loss of hearing
and chronic headaches and sensitivity to light, all symptoms of concussion. But he was afraid to go to the doctor for follow-up because he knew that once he returned, he would be placed in isolation, and he was fearful of dying alone. The most concerning was my own constituent, who is diabetic and knew that she was getting a quarter of her medication. And it was so frightening because when I went to see my constituent after a couple weeks of detention, I could visibly see that she was unwell. I could go on and on about, and I am keeping, and Ranking Member Thompson, I would like to submit for the record the list of detainees who I have encountered with medical conditions that are being undertreated or ignored, for the record, because I believe that we need to hold our government accountable in the short run and in the long. I know I've taken a lot of time. I would love to still ask this question. What can we, as members of Congress who have the ability to conduct oversight, what should we be looking for in this moment so that we hold this administration accountable in the short and the long run? And to our advocates who work with families, how can we best collaborate? How can we be partners in ensuring that the law is upheld? And finally, to the mayor, what support can we offer mayors? You are not alone. There are others across this country that are municipal codes are being ignored. How can we best be a resource to the families, to legal advocates, and to municipal government?
So I'll start.
Dealer's choice.
Yes, thank you, Congresswoman. I'll start with the first question. I think it's really important that each of you are doing your part in conducting your federal oversight visits and living true to the promises. I think it's very important that each of you are conducting oversight visits and living up to what your legal obligation is to the constituency that you serve, and also to all Americans across the United States, including immigrant Americans. The things that you should be looking for are the very things that you just shared, including egregious violations of any standard of care. Instances where people are being denied medical care, where they are being given the wrong medication or the wrong quantity of medication. You should be looking for constitutional violations, listening to the stories of people that are being told that they are being forced to sign voluntary departure agreements without knowing what it is that they are signing. We should be thinking about all of the different ways in which food and health care and sanitary conditions are wholly inadequate, because these are all elements of terrible conditions of confinement that no human being should have to endure. Yet we're seeing it routinely, not just at Delaney Hall, but in detention facilities all across the country. So those are some of the things that I would recommend that you continue to look out for. And telling the stories of individuals that are detained and their loved ones is perhaps the most important thing. We cannot lose sight of the harm that is being inflicted on the people that are inside. There's a lot of noise outside, and it's really important to maintain our focus on what's happening inside.
Thank you for that question, Congresswoman. We are urging Congress to really continue conducting oversight visits and sharing those findings publicly, right? All of you have been doing that already. And it is important to continue doing that. It's important to hold public hearings just like this one, so that information about what's happening inside Delaney Hall, what you're seeing, what you're hearing inside Delaney Hall is making it to the ears, not just of advocates, not just attorneys, but to the world. Also requesting investigations by appropriate oversight bodies, and also increasing transparency requirements of these detention facilities. We know that these detention facilities are just an environment created by the Trump administration to continuously harm our people. And it cannot continue. Delaney Hall detention in New Jersey, you know, the New Jerseyans have fought for a ban to end detention in our state. And continuously the Trump administration, GEO Group, Core Civic, they come in and they tell the New Jerseyans what to do, what our values are. But New Jerseyans have continuously stood up to these global multi-million-dollar private prison corporations and the Trump administration and said, no, not here. We will not be the ICE capital of the USA. We will not be doing that. And so we're really urging Congress to continue doing oversight and to continue urging and fighting for frequent and open oversight hearings. And also, as y'all have already done, continue to support families through your constituent services in your offices.
Any brief responses? Respect.
One additional thing is the enforcement of various environmental laws in vicinity of Tyrannus Avenue and Delaney Hall. Right across the street from the facility is energy transfer, and something that occurred during this whole period of intense protest was the deployment of pyrotechnic munitions such as CS gas grenades, things like that, which a stray spark could have caused an environmental catastrophe in the entire city of Newark. I believe that there must be some oversight also on the environmental aspects of this facility and the safety of all its men.
I would just concur with what was said. Oversight is important. We obviously can't get in, but you can. And not only just looking for human rights violations, but also violation of local laws and state laws, them treading over those laws with impunity, especially private institutions having the ability to do that, all together and try to bring GEO in to one of these hearings as well, and question these private, prison owners about why they think they have the ability to, disregard public law.
And one of the shortcomings of the law is you don't have subpoena power.
Right.
If you get to be the majority party, you can bring those entities before the committee and ask the questions.
Right.
And so we look forward to the day when that can be done. We have two other colleagues from New Jersey we want to add to the panel. Two colleagues from New Jersey.
They're going to staff you.
I didn't face. Yeah, well, if we get another chair, we just bring them here. So we recognize the young lady from New Jersey for 5 minutes, Ms. Watson Cole.
So thank you very much to the ranking member. Thank you to my colleague and my sweetheart, Ms. McIver, and to all of my colleagues. Thank you all for the work that you do and for being here and being willing to have this conversation with me. And thank you to the mayor who stood with us when we tried to stand with you, and who's been doing a marvelous job in this city, keeping all of our people protected. If I were to go into Delaney Hall today, what should I go see? What should I demand to see? Who should I demand to talk to? I want to ask you this just
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. First of all, I think you should demand to talk to as many individuals that are detained there as possible. We need to hear directly from people who are detained, hear their stories, listen to what it is that they are experiencing in terms of the neglect that they're experiencing, the food, the inability to access medical care, and all the other things that we've been hearing about. We need to document as many of those stories as possible.
So we should look at the medical facility.
Yes.
We should know whether or not we smell food, see food, right? We should see where they're sleeping and why people might be sleeping on floors instead of beds.
Yes, I
And then
think
we
it's,
should talk to whomever.
yeah, I think all of that is right.
I've got this very wild question to ask of you that I asked of my colleague here, who told me to ask you. The majority of the detainees at Delaney Hall have committed no crime, were even picked up when they were doing what they legally had a responsibility, obligation, and willingness to do, and to report in. Their homes were invaded. They were snatched off the streets, schools, in front of their children, etc. Why don't they represent a class? And as such, why is there no class action on their behalf, given that their situations are so similar and their standing is so similar?
I think that's a great question, Congresswoman. It's something that requires a high degree of factual investigation. And let me tell you, all options are on the table right now. And we at the ACLU are not leaving anything behind and making sure that we're doing as much as possible to collect the information that we need for legal or other advocacy strategies.
So, sir, if there is specific information that we as members of the legislature can get, you gotta let us know how that factors into the possibility of New Jersey standing up against Delaney Hall and what's happening there, which is so inhumane that it makes me cry. But also as an illustration to the other states where things of this nature are happening. Because this is bullying and evilness and disregard for the rights of individuals who are here, citizens or not. And these people who don't remember that their ancestors were not citizens when they came here seem to have no regard whatsoever for the rights of these individuals. Mr. Marshall, thank you so much for your service to this country. Thank you for then extending your desire to be of service to help those people in and around the facility. And I am so sorry that you had the experience that you had. But this is the illustration of what is un-American. And we can't just wait. We can't be silent. Me, myself, and I, to distinguish myself from my righteous leader here, I not only believe that Delaney Hall should be shut down, I believe that ICE should be disbanded and reformed. And I believe that the Department of Homeland Security was created in response to an immediate threat, to a perceived threat to our well-being, and we just put everything in it. And that it, in and of itself, it needs to be disbanded in its current form, and things that are equally important to the safety and security of our communities, like FEMA and TSA and things like that, they don't need to be held hostage to the evilness of this unlawful law enforcement that is taking place. So I didn't ask the questions it's not unusual for me. I didn't ask the questions that were put before me, but I asked the questions that are burning on my heart that I needed to have an answer to. And I just want you to know that I am grateful for each and every one of you in the space that you work. And I tell the mayor all the time that he is my hero, because he stands up all the time for all the citizens, not just Newark, but the whole state of New Jersey. So God bless you, and thank you. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, for giving me this opportunity.
For the record, Watson, Coleman, and I sit on the floor and each vote together. So I know where her heart is, and I know what she says is real. You don't ever have to wonder what's on her mind. She's going to tell you. I now yield the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Menendez for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing the Committee on Homeland Security to the great city of Newark to raise attention around what's been happening inside Delaney Hall. I've been fighting this facility for more than 2 years alongside my incredible and fearless colleagues, Representative Watson Coleman and Representative McIver. We first raised concerns with the Biden administration in 2024 when reports suggested that DHS was reconsidering opening Delaney Hall. Even then, it was clear this facility would become what this facility would become and the immense harm it would inflict on our immigrant families and our communities. I've been to Delaney 16 times, and every visit has confirmed the inhumanity we feared. I saw it when Delaney reopened its doors in May 2025, despite our repeated forceful objections. I saw it when more than 20 armed DHS officers attempted to prevent Representatives McIver, Watson Coleman, and me from conducting an oversight visit last year, and when they illegally arrested Mayor Baraka. And I see it every time I walk through the facility. Mothers and fathers separated from their U.S. citizen children, including Martine Soto, whose wife Gabrielle is here today, and who've been fighting the conditions from both inside the facility and outside. Pastors and faith leaders taken from their congregations, women terrified of giving birth in ICE detention. People don't know when they'll receive medical care, whether they'll have edible food that day, or if they will be afforded basic due process protections when the United States government decides their futures. For years, we have been raising the alarm about what's happening inside Delaney Hall. Now the rest of the country is seeing it too, all because of the courage of the people in detention who are choosing to speak out about what is happening inside. You heard earlier about Emmanuel Rodriguez, who was kept in medical isolation for 4 months after he was kept from having crutches or a wheelchair for 40 days despite his medical condition. During a hours-long conversation in the medical isolation unit, Emmanuel told me that he signed a form of voluntary departure because he couldn't bear the conditions in Delaney any longer, because of the torture that he faced inside Delaney Hall at the hands of the United States government. In every visit, I see the evidence of medical neglect. Multiple people have told me they've denied post-operative medication, leading to severe health declines. Pregnant women who suffered miscarriages, and they were told by GEO medical staff that it was a psychological pregnancy. And individuals desperate for mental health care are denied treatment and medication, all in violation of detention standards that ICE and GEO Group are both morally and contractually obligated to uphold. The most important thing we can do here today is make sure the stories of those inside Delaney Hall are not ignored and are heard by the American people. Ms. Martinez, based on NJAIJ's extensive work with detained individuals and their families, are the circumstances I just described isolated incidences at Delaney Hall?
Everything that you named has been repeated over by attorneys, by advocates, by families. Everything that you said is right. And also, it's not just singular to Delaney Hall. It's a symptom of a system that continuously dehumanizes immigrant community members.
And in your opinion, do you think it's chance that when these stories are being brought to the public by representatives on this stage, and Senator Kim and others, when the people heard there's pregnant women inside, 18-year-olds inside who are on the verge of missing their high school graduation, do you think it's by chance that ICE began again to show up in Newark in force to create a situation outside of Delaney Hall, so to shift focus from those stories of the individuals inside?
ICE has always been escalating the situation outside of Delaney Hall. It happened last year in 2025. It happened again this year. They brought out a Bearcat. They brought out ICE agents in military-grade riot gear. And again, all protesters had and all families had were signs saying, "Bring my husband home." The child continuously has gone up to the gate. Multiple children have gone up to the gate, questioning when their parents are going to come home. And so Delaney Hall has continuously been an issue. There's continuously been an issue about accountability and transparency in Delaney Hall.
Mayor Barack, over a year ago, when we were outside Delaney Hall together, the day that you were illegally arrested, 20 armed ICE DHS officers came, the 3 of us, to confront you. Do you believe that was a purposeful act of intimidation to get the city to walk away from its obligations to inspect Delaney Hall?
Absolutely. There was mountains of evidence that show that they were given instruction to arrest me. It wasn't just happenstance or something that happened by accident. This was a deliberate and intentional act. And as these cases go on, you'll begin to see that these people purposefully and deliberately called those folks and told them to arrest the mayor of the city of Newark.
Because if they would arrest the mayor of the largest city in New Jersey, if they would put their hands on 2 female members of Congress, the question I asked that day, the question I posed to our neighbors across the country is, if this is what's happening outside Delaney Hall, no one is safe in Trump's America. And if this is happening outside Delaney Hall to us, can you only begin to imagine what is happening inside? Since that day, all of us have brought those stories out to the American people. I appreciate the chairman having this hearing today, because we need to continue to share these stories with the American people, because I believe this is not who we are as a country. I don't believe Americans support pregnant women being in detention centers. I don't believe they support 18-year-olds being kept from their high school graduation. And if we hear these stories and share these stories, I do believe that we can change the narrative in this country from what we heard from this administration and begin a pathway forward. So thank you so much, Chairman. I appreciate you this opportunity.
Thank you. Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas for 5 minutes, Mr. Al Green.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. I greatly appreciate your leadership. Just recently you were in Puerto Rico, making sure that justice prevails there. I find myself doing today. I'm not from New Jersey, but I am a United States Congressman. And New Jersey is in the United States of America. And I'm here because injustice anywhere, as Dr. King put it, is still a threat to justice everywhere. And injustice against the mayor of New Jersey is a threat to justice for any mayor in the United States of America. And I'm here to stand with this mayor to let him know that a United States congressman from Texas cares about what's happening in New Jersey. And I'm grateful. I'm also grateful to know that you have a champion. When you wanted someone to fight for you, a champion showed up. This champion should not be neglected. If a champion stands up for me, I'm going to stand up with that champion. Your Congresswoman is a champion. She deserves our support. I will support her. I will do what I can to make sure that the injustice being perpetrated against her is never taken to fruition. Those charges ought to be dismissed. She shouldn't have to go through. GEO has got to go. Not only does it have to go, it ought to return the money that it has taken. That $1 billion ought to be returned to the federal government, to the taxpayers of this country, because they haven't earned it. They are violating the Constitution. They are violating rights of human beings and the right to just have human dignity. This company has got to go, and we want our money back. And finally, I won't need the entire 5 minutes. I just want to ask one question. How are persons detained who are detained? How are these persons accorded the preeminent opportunity to express their need for due process? Due process is a basic fundamental right that every person is entitled to in this country. Every person. Due process is the right to raise your hand and say, you have the wrong person. It's not me. When you deny me my due process, you are now instituting a process that can cause me to be illegally detained, and that illegal detention is in violation of the Constitution. So how can people let the world know, and let those that are in charge know, that they're being illegally detained, just to say it, and with some degree of certainty that it will be heard and it will be processed appropriately? What is the process for people to express their grievances, their complaints, so that they can be properly heard? And I ask you, sir, Mr. Representative from the ACLU.
Thank you so much, Congressman. I appreciate you being here. Look, there are many different ways in which somebody can tell the story of being denied their fundamental rights, including the right to due process. And look, as you say, due process is a fundamental right, and it is not something that's only available in convenient times. It has to be available to everybody, otherwise it's not a right at all. And so what we are talking about here are opportunities that we need to afford people to file habeas petitions and be able to say, I was denied due process, file claims in court to say that they were denied due process, and tell their stories to their representatives and to the media about why it was that they feel as though they were denied their fundamental rights. We need to repeat it over and over and over again to make sure that people are hearing the truth of what these folks are experiencing. And I have to say, my colleague Barry mentioned the fact that we need to make sure that every person who's in immigration detention has access to an attorney. Let me tell you, one of many differences between the criminal system and the immigration system is that in the criminal system, defendants have the right to an attorney. In the immigration system, they do not. And so in New Jersey, we're taking steps to make sure that every single person who's detained has access to an attorney. There's more than we can do, but I'm grateful to Governor Sherrill and the legislature in New Jersey for committing $20 million to that project. We need to make sure that every single person who's being treated as a prisoner has access to an attorney so that they can advocate for their due process rights.
Thank you. The right to a lawyer is the pathway to the great greatness. That's the pathway. I'm a lawyer, but if I'm incarcerated, I don't want to have to be my lawyer. I want someone else to represent me, who can take it to the bar of justice outside of the walls where I might be confined. So you're right about the great writ, and every person has to have access to the great writ, the writ of habeas corpus. Finally, I will leave you with this, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to do it. And I would say only that we ought to live up to the pledge committee. The pledge, liberty and justice for all. We ought to live up to that pledge. It ought not be something that applies to you because of your color. It ought not be something that applies to you because of the language you speak. It ought not be something that applies to you because you look a certain way. Every person in this country ought to have the benefit of liberty and justice for all. I thank you.
Thank you. The gentleman yields back. Let me thank our witnesses for your testimony today. It's been revealing, but it's also traumatic in that what you are highlighting is just the opposite of who we are supposed to be as Americans and a nation. And I commit to you that this committee won't shirk its responsibility. To that end, once this hearing concludes, we are going to Delaney Hall this evening. Congress talks about oversight, and the laws say we can present ourselves. So we don't know whether we'll get in or not, but we'll find out. And that becomes part of the record. Some of the questions that you have been posing to us, if we get in, we'll start the process of posing those questions to the GEO and ICE officials who will be present. We don't know what we'll find. The law doesn't require us to give notice, even though they wanted us to give notice. we're gonna follow the law. The law says we don't have to give notice as members of Congress, so we're not gonna do it. So it's fact finding, it's oversight, and let me tell you, what we've heard today is not a good view or a good look. We're better than this. And so we have work to do. But part of it is to establish the record so that when people say why you are proposing this particular legislation, I'm glad you asked. We did an oversight hearing in Newark, New Jersey, and did fact finding at Delaney Hall that got us to this point. So our witnesses have been very, very helpful with that. And so I will yield to the young lady whose district Delaney Hall was in for any final comments.
Thank you so much, Ranking Member. Thank you to each of our witnesses for appearing today and for sharing your testimony, and to my colleagues for shining light on the ICE terror happening in my hometown and in hometowns across this nation. We all know that the way this administration terrorizes our communities is about more than just one detention facility. This is a pattern. It is an organized effort to keep us scared and silent. And what we are doing here today is stopping that effort in its tracks. On behalf of everyone here, let me not mince my words. We will not be quiet about the horrible things happening at the hands of ICE right here in this city or in any city across this country. It has been, many of my colleagues today, they've talked about everything that we've seen since we've been there. You all have talked about it, and it's horrible. I wish I could say that these things were not true, but they are. We have seen this facility keep pregnant women with no prenatal care. We have seen them mistreat them. We've seen them hold high school students who have literally just turned 18 years old in the middle of their senior year, be held for months and literally miss graduation this month because they've been held with no criminal record. We've talked to detainees who've been maced and beat just for peacefully protesting, and even transferred out to another state and deported. As mentioned, we've seen 42-year-old John Wilson Brutus, who went into the Delaney Hall and in less than 24 hours came out in a body bag. These are the things that we have seen this administration do. As mentioned before, literally 52 people have died in ICE custody since Trump has taken office. And billions of our tax dollars are spent to make that all possible. We, you, this country, you are paying for this. You have paid for these people to die and to be mistreated each and every day. And it is unacceptable. So the question before us is whether Delaney Hall has demonstrated that it can operate in a manner that is transparent, accountable, and consistent with basic human dignity. And based on the testimony that we've heard today, they are not. What we heard today is the logical endpoint of the kind of policy that Trump and DHS is pursuing. A policy where cruelty is the point. We won't give into this cruelty. Not today, not tomorrow, not last May, and never. We will keep shining the light and fighting back. We will keep working to shut down Delaney Hall. With that, I yield back to our ranking member, and I thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Congresswoman McIver. I want to thank again my colleagues for inviting me here to host this hearing. Hearing no further business, the forum stands adjourned.
Thank you, Mayor. I just
That was painless.
Back stretch.
Yeah, I know. Me too.
Oh,